So in the last episode, we finally started that red Corniche, so we've got a runner. And in this episode, we'll run it up to temperature to see if we've got any brakes. We also address some alternator problems on the Mercedes E-Class estate, and finally get that Porsche 928 GT into the garage and out of the weather so we can finally get to work on it. But first, okay, so I've just come across this problem. I was out in the Corniche yesterday and suddenly the car started misfiring. Now, you know these are V8s, and if they run on 7, they still run nice and smooth, but it's always been perfect, this car. I've never had a problem, it's never missed a beat. But I think you remember in an earlier episode, I replaced the distributor cap and the points in the condenser. I did a load of other jobs as well. But I remember looking at the leads, the ignition leads themselves at the time, and I thought, this is a little bit more involved than I expected. It's probably going to take a lot of work, this. So I kind of left it to a later date, and now that later date has come, now the car started to misfire. I stretched in, and to my absolute horror, when I was pulling the ignition leads off to see which cylinder wasn't firing properly, they were literally snapping off, clean off in my hands. They've become so brittle over the years. And I think if you remember, it wasn't a barn for 16 years before I purchased the car, and I've been driving around in it for what, 3 or 4 years now. So 20 years, you know, it's going to take its toll. The heat that these engines generate in the engine bay is unbelievable. Everything literally cooks in there. It's like an oven. Again, it's one of them jobs that was probably done at the factory on the engine. It was all assembled and then the engine was dropped in complete. And I suppose on a scale of 1 to 10, if I was to, you know, gauge its difficulty, it'd probably come up a 9, believe it or not. It's not the fact that it's such a difficult job. The difficulty comes from the lack of accessibility. I mean, at the back of the engine here, you've got 2 bolts that go into the back of the cylinder head, which hold a bunch of ignition leads from each side. To get to that bolt, you've literally got 1 inch or 1.5 inches. If you've got children's hands, you might be in with a fighting chance. Otherwise, good luck with that one. Your hands are literally cut to pieces, and then when you finally free it all up, you have to carefully feed everything through past all the ancillaries and cables and hoses. There's all kinds of wires in the way, and you don't want to dislodge something or cause further problems. So it's a job that you really have to take your time with. But I'm sorry to say I'm having to tackle this now. But you know, I've really got my work cut out on this one. It's probably why no one actually does them. They just leave them till these could actually be the original leads that the car left the factory with. Maybe they've been changed once, I don't know. But everything seems in its place, untouched, so I'd go with that. Probably the original ignition leads, and they're probably, what, 50 years old. So anyway, there's only one thing left to do, and that's, as always, let's get stuck in. Now, I have to stress, this is awkward and quite time consuming. If I were you, I'd set a whole day aside to take your time and not disturbing anything else around it. One of these jobs that just has to be done, but not one you'd want to do too often. And if you thought that A-bank was tricky, it's now out with the kids' hands to move on to the more awkward B-bank. Oof. Oh dear. That's one way of getting them out. Now top tip, just drill these out slightly bigger so that the slightly larger newer leads will go through with ease. Now don't forget, these have got to be in the correct order in terms of firing order and length, so just take your time. And if you're worried about these pulling out when you're refitting them, just put a piece of tape along the back, hold them in place. Come on, you slippery little suckers. And just carefully guide them around the back of the cylinder head. And just make sure any pipes that were undone to get the leads out are reconnected. Carefully slide that sheath over so that the bolt holes line up. Widen the rubbers so they slide over nice and easily. That'll do. Halfway there. Let's give it a go. Well, that doesn't sound right. Nah, that's just not happy. So as I refer back to the manual, sitting inside of the car with the engine at the front, you can clearly see the A bank on the right and the B bank on the left. And this is the correct firing order on the distributor. Quick check of the leads. Quick switch about. That's more like it. It's good.
See, the problem was, you could hear it misfiring before. I realised that I got two of the leads mixed up on the B bank, and it's easily done, it's one of them, but all good now. Next, I'll put a new coil in. So a little bit of an interlude here. Tell you what, it's a bit of a rude awakening coming back from the States to this weather. It's absolutely freezing. Yeah, so I've got back and I've realised that the alternator was playing up on me trusty 210. And what happens on these, you've got like a ballast resistor on the back of the alternator, and normally that's the first thing to go, but if you've got like a loud whizzing noise or like a smell of burning as well, normally it's your alternator completely gone. So I'm convinced that's what's the problem here. So I'm going to remove the alternator and fit a new one. It should take about an hour. It's not really a big job. It's a little bit tricky in places, but anyway, enjoy.
So let's first disconnect the battery for safety. Off with the belt tension and off with the belt. Remove the two bolts with the E14 socket. Carefully off with the plug and the electrical connection. Well, that's one way of getting it off. Check it with the new part. All good. Now, you can see I'm using an axle stand just to take its weight. It's a heavy part, just to help me fit it in. A little bit of a wiggle, and we're in. Now this bottom bolt here also holds in the bracket to keep the hose away from the belt. And you can see there's a little 8mm bolt missing from the bottom. I'll have to find one of those. So this alternator's obviously been off before. Back on with the plugs and the tray. Back off with the tension. Back on with the belt. Quick check over, and we're done.
Right, so now with that done, back to the main objective of the day, which is to move these cars around and finally get the Porsche GT in the garage, out of the rain and the wind and the cold, because we've literally had 4 months of rain here, and quite frankly I'm absolutely sick of it. I can't get any work done outside, and I don't think it's doing the car any good sitting out there. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to clean all this up, put a new air filter in, put the correct anti-freeze coolant in there from IntroCar, which I've ordered, and I better check for any leaks, because this was actually dry, if you remember. I know I got the car started in the last episode, but this time I want to run the car up to temperature, see if there's any leaks, see if we've actually got brakes, fingers crossed, and eventually get the GT in here and start work on it. So actually I think that's a parcel just arriving from IntroCar. Yeah, here we go as the postman, so let's get to it, eh?
When you're restoring a car, I think it's important to have a parts supplier you know you can trust. IntroCar always have the parts I require, And considering I ordered these parts just this morning and they've come all the way from London and I'm based in Liverpool, you know, I believe they delivered to Canada in just 3 days. I think that's incredible service. Anyway, now we just need to find a trusted parts supplier for both the Jaguar and, more importantly, the Lotus Elite, which, following the Porsche 928, that's got to be the next one on the list for next year. Right, let's have a look at what we've got here. That's the baby. There's that coil for a later date. Oh, and this is the blue antifreeze that IntroCar recommend. Rolls-Royce and Bentley recommend the green stuff, but in my opinion, the blue stuff is just as good or even better. Oh, and by the way, guys, IntroCar have kindly offered a 10% discount on all parts right across the board for all online orders using the code Mavers. Well, apart from the fact that it won't select into gear, it does feel like I've got some brakes, but I can hear a squelching noise coming from the back. So this is going to require some further investigation. And there we go. Oof. Well, that looks like a burst flexi hose. LHM pissing all over the floor. Great. Well, that doesn't look too bad. Don't worry about that little puddle. That's just where I've spilt a bit, topping it up. Okay guys, well I think that just about brings this year to a close. And what I think has been a fantastic first year for this channel, and that's thanks to you guys. Thank you for all your kind comments and all your undying support. I think we've done a real eclectic mix of cars this year, and I like to think you've enjoyed it as much as I have. And if there's one thing I can take from this year, I hope that it's encouraged you guys to have a go yourself and just understand the basic rudiments of the classic cars you own. Look, there's some fantastic restorers out there, there's some great garages. There's also an awful lot of charlatans who are happy to take your money and keep your car for a couple of years. So if anything, I hope we've encouraged you guys to have a go yourselves, and that keeps the bank balance in check, and you get a lot of pleasure in doing so as well. Yeah, so my New Year's resolution is to get this into paint, do the dreaded cam belt, get it back to old Tom, who's now, he must be pushing 95 years of age, and I promised him that I'd bring it back to him and give him one last drive. So hopefully that's all going to work out early this year. And also find a complete interior for this beautiful Corniche over here, which was totally missing when I purchased the car. So as you know, as you can see, we've got a busy year ahead of us, and once again, thank you so much for your undying support, and see you all next year. Thank you for watching this episode of Classic Obsession. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and subscribe, and see you all next time.